evening, everybody. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner. And I'm so happy that you're greeting us tonight and you're viewing us on Trinity TV and all the cable channels that provide this station. And you're also watching us on Facebook and watching us on the internet. So welcome to Shepherd's Corner tonight. Well, the shepherd is in the air, but I have a worthy representative with me. He is Dr. Terrence Farrell, but you know him wearing many different jackets. Let me put it that way. He was the former deputy governor of the Central Bank. He was also a director of Guardian Holdings. He was also a director of Republic Finance Holdings. Yeah, a lot of finance people here, well. But he is now the chair of Credit. And we're here to talk about our Catholic education, our Catholic schools. And our Archbishop's headline is, "We need to take back our schools." What does he mean by that? Good evening, Dr. Farrell.
Good evening, Deacon. Good to see you.
Nice to have you on the Shepherd's Corner. And the big question is, how can we help our Catholic schools? That's the big question. And what does His Grace mean by we need to take back our schools? Let's kick that off.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to understand that we have recognized for a long time that we have had a problem with our Catholic schools. I remember going back maybe 10 years ago, we had a discussion. This is after the synod and so on. We had a discussion with the clergy. We did a presentation to them on the performance of our Catholic schools. So this problem has been around for a long, long time. And as His Grace has pointed out, you know, it is the problem which is now keeping him up at night. Yes. since he has been installed. And there is a problem. The problem, in fact, there are two problems. The first problem is that our Catholic schools are not performing, on average, our Catholic schools are not performing very well at all. And I said on average because we do have some of our schools that are performing very well indeed. But far too many of our Catholic schools, primary and secondary, are not performing. Just to give you an illustration, in terms of the SEA, so we're talking about at the primary school level, and these are the 2018 results. So
we up to date.
We up to date in terms of the examination. It turns out that the average score for Catholic schools in math was 7.1% lower than the national average. Right? So the national average was 58.8. The average for Catholic schools was 54.6. In English language arts, the national average was 57.9. For Catholic schools, it was 55. So 5% lower. Right. And in the essay, the national average was 11.1, and for Catholic schools, it was 10.5. So on average, our Catholic schools are performing below the national average. Now, the national population of schools includes government schools, and it includes the other denominational schools. So the Hindu schools, the Muslim schools, Presbyterian schools, et cetera, right?
So hold on, I want to stop you right here.
Yes.
Let's go back to these figures.
Yes.
You said in math,
yes,
the national average was 58.8.
That's right.
Is that 58.8%?
Yes.
In English, is it English? You said it was 57.9.
That's right.
And essays was 11.1?
Yes, the essays scored differently. It scored as a 20. Right?
So it's 11.1 out of 20?
Yes.
Okay, because you really shocked me there. Yes. I was saying 11.1%. I wanted to die.
No. Yes. So that's what it is in terms of the... Now, one of the things about the national level, the government has a benchmark of 30%. They use the benchmark of 30%. 30% is an extremely low score.
Yes.
But the government uses the 30% benchmark in order to determine whether a student will need to repeat the SEA. So if a student gets below 30%, then and they have so they're 11, they're not yet 12, they can then go back into Standard 5 and they repeat the SEA. So the 30% is used as a benchmark. It's not a good benchmark in terms of assessing actual performance.
Correct.
Now, when we look at the numbers in Catholic schools, the numbers of students who have failed to get 30%, we find that 20%, 19.5% of our students did not get 30%. Now, you have to understand, this is 740 children out of 3,797 RC school children who sat the exam did not get 30% in math. In English and language arts, 424 students, 11.2% did not get 30%, and in the essay, 517 did not get the 30%. So we have a problem.
That's a serious problem.
It is a serious problem. One of the things I want to point out to people is that we also have to understand that we're comparing ourselves to the national average, but Trinidad and Tobago, in terms of our education system performance, is lagging that of the rest of the world. So we need to put that into perspective. Our national performance is not good relative to where the rest of the world. So when you're talking about countries like Canada, like Finland, and so on and so forth, where they are going in terms of the education system, how they are performing in terms of certain tests like the PISA test and so on, which are used internationally to determine how students are performing and so on, Trinidad and Tobago is not doing well. And so our national average is low, and our RC school averages are lower than the national average. And this is part of the problem. So we have that issue on the academic side. But in the second problem that we have in respect of our Catholic schools is that our sense is, and we haven't measured it, and it, in fact, is one of the things that we know that we now have to work on measuring it, but the sense is that our Catholic schools have progressively lost their Catholic identity and ethos.
Right.
That we have a situation where we have schools that are Catholic in name, but when you go into those schools, there is nothing there that tells you that this is a Catholic school. Yeah. That you should be able to identify a school as Catholic. In other words, you go in and you ought to be able to see a crucifix. You ought to be able to have certain kinds of things like benediction, like Mass periodically, and you know, whether it is once a month that the children go to Mass.
And Catholic
and so
education.
On. You have Catholic education and so on and so forth. So you have to have those kinds of practices, stopping for the Angelus, we were talking about that and so on. Those things mark a school as Catholic and not as government school or Hindu school or Muslim school and so on. And we have lost that. And therefore, we feel that it's extremely important that our schools, if they are to be truly Catholic, need to reestablish their Catholic identity and their Catholic ethos in our schools.
Well, let me ask you a question. What is holding us back from having that identity and ethos? So I want to start there, even though, as we were talking earlier, most parents want their children to achieve, right? And then the identity comes second or third. But let's push it first. If they're Catholic, what do we need? I want to go back here to take back our schools.
Well, I mean, one of the things that His Grace points out in his last column in the Catholic News is that he means by taking back our schools is we now have to have an active ministry that addresses our schools, I think both primary and our secondary Catholic schools, that begins to that process of reestablishing that Catholic identity. Now the thing is that we have to also recognize that we have certain problems or limitations. If you go back 30 years, 40 years, when we were young, so, there were a lot more priests around, for example. And the proportion of the population that was Catholic was actually higher. So if you look at the population centers, what we are seeing is that if you look over the course of the last 30, 40, 50 years, the proportion of the population of Trinidad and Tobago that is Catholic has been declining. We are seeing a declining number of priests, including our parish priests, and our priests are also getting a little bit older. So we have an issue there in terms of actually being able to provide that kind of service. Now, one of the things that the AEC bishops recognize, because they did a letter on Catholic education a few years ago, I think 1999, was the letter on. They recognized that problem. And they also recognized, therefore, that what needed to happen, one of the things that needed to happen was that we needed to have stronger and more effective lay ministry in the schools. And that was very clear, because since you don't have more priests and religious, they are declining in numbers, then clearly the lay people need to step up. So the deacons and so on need to step up in terms of providing that ministry to our schools. But that's one of the things that we know that we need, clearly needs to be done.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question here. You gave us some figures here on Trinidad and Tobago's results.
Yes.
Look at the AEC.
Yes.
What is it like? Or can we compare ourselves with the AEC at all? Or are we, as a country, Trinidad and Tobago, also below the AEC's Catholic average?
Well, I can't. I mean, the AEC is the entire Caribbean. And so all of them are doing like the CXC examinations and so on. I do know, and I don't have the data on that here, unfortunately, but I do know, for example, if you look across the Caribbean in terms of education performance, countries like Barbados do a lot better than we do. Really? Trinidad is, in fact, better than a couple of the other Caribbean countries, which doesn't speak very well for them.
Correct.
But in a place, Barbados's education system has been consistently actually quite good. So if you look at their performance at CXC and at Cape and so on, it's actually been quite solid. Now, I just want to emphasize the point that in many instances, our performance is not bad. We have schools here that are excellent. We have Catholic schools, primary and secondary, that are excellent, that are doing great. And I would probably suggest that they do have a Catholic identity and ethos in those schools. Places like St. Joseph's Convent in Port of Spain come to mind. Fatima, I think, particularly under Father Gregory and so on, also come to mind. But those are now the exceptions, and they are becoming a minority. And we have to remember that we have these kinds of numbers of 740 children who haven't passed math at primary school, 424 who haven't passed English. And we have to ask ourselves, what happens to them? And the problem is that what happens to these children is that they don't get into secondary school, or if they do get into secondary school, the data are showing us that, let us say 18,000 children get into secondary school at the SEA, 11 or 12,000 do the CXC.
Wow.
So the question is...
So wait, you're talking about 18,000 get in.
18,000 come into Form 1,
into Form 1. And only 11.
And then when you look at the CXC, which is Form 5, the examination Form 5, the CSEC examination is now called, the CSEC examination, we see 11 or 12,000 students doing that examination.
Where are the 7,000?
So the question is, where have those students gone? So we're seeing a dropping out, a falling out of students between Form 1 and Form 5.
Okay.
Right? So we have a problem, and I don't even want to talk about at the Cape level and at the tertiary level and so on. But let's focus on the primary school level and recognize that we have a problem. The problem manifests itself, I think, in some very practical things. For example, it manifests itself in adult illiteracy. The people who have focused on questions of adult literacy in this country, like Paula Lucy Smith and those who are working actively in that area, have pointed out that a high proportion of our population, of our workforce, are functionally illiterate. They in effect cannot read or write to the standard that is required of them to hold a job in a proper workplace. That's a problem. So they have come through the system, and they are unable to read. When I'm looking at some of the data, it is quite astonishing. I'm looking at some of the data on the SEA results, and there are schools where all of the children, 100% of them, fortunately it's not a lot, but in terms of numbers, 100% failed to get 30% in math. 100%. All of them failed. So we have schools...
In a primary school?
In a primary school.
Catholic?
So, Catholic, yes, it's a Catholic. The data that I have are for the Catholic schools.
My goodness, yeah.
So we have schools there are some of them that are located in our urban areas, some of them that are located in the rural areas. So again, we have to look and see, okay, what's happening. Now, in terms of the other thing that we can do, that needs to be done, is, I think, the parents. Because again, one of the things that the church has always emphasized, and this goes back
I saw it in the
to the 1960s and so on, it is that the parent has the first responsibility for the education of the child.
Right.
It is not the school, it is not the teacher, it's not the principal, it is not the priest, it is the parent who has first responsibility. And in fact, educators will tell you that when you see those children who do exceptionally well, at SEA, at CXC, at CAPE, and so on, you will always find that there is a household, that they are operating from a household that is nurturing, that is supportive, and that is encouraging them on the path of education. And so therefore, parents have a critically important role to play in terms of the education of their children.
But you know, Dr. Terrence, and this has been my own experience doing some work with the schools.
Yes.
Some young people tell me that when they go home and ask mommy to help them,
Yes.
mommy can't help
Mommy
them.
can't help them.
And when mommy can't help them,
Yes.
mommy becomes frustrated.
Right.
And sometimes mommy will shout at them, what are you coming to,
Exactly.
what are you asking me that for?
Exactly.
Mommy is ashamed, or
That's
daddy
right.
is ashamed
That's
to be
right.
able to say, I don't know.
No, yes.
And therefore you get a blowout.
Exactly. Exactly right. I'm glad you said mommy, because sometimes the daddies are not around.
Correct.
So part of the issues that we have here now, these things are all intersecting, because among the issues that the Archdiocese, the Archbishop is addressing in terms of the pastoral plan that he's working on developing for the Archdiocese going forward, is that, I mean, we've identified 5 areas. Parish, of course, and parish life is one. Family is one. Catholic education is one. And you can therefore immediately see the connection that you have between family and what is happening, and parenting and so on, and Catholic education. And we need to link those two things and ensure that those things are working in harmony.
Now, the reality is we have lots of single mothers
Yes.
bringing up a large
That's right. Yes.
part of our population.
That's right.
Single mothers.
Yes.
I mean, I just dropped a single mother
Yes.
with her 4-year-old son
Yes.
to Shafford's Court.
Right.
And she was coming all the way from Pity Valley.
Right.
And there she is, a single mother
Yes.
with her 4-year-old
4-year-old
Joshua.
child. Yes.
And they're bringing them, and I'm dropping her home.
Yes.
Now,
It's
he
at
is
this hour of the
arriving-
night.
Huh?
At this hour of the night.
At this hour of the night.
Yes.
This is, you know, I picked her up at about 20 to 8.
Right, exactly.
You know, and she was waiting for our taxi at the side
Right.
of the road.
Yes.
Now, what happens to that child with these
Yes.
single mothers trying to make ends meet? They have to carry their child to work
Exactly.
with them, or go and
Exactly.
pick them up, ask for a little time off, come and pick them up.
Exactly.
This child, when he gets home,
Yes.
if
Can't function.
Precisely.
Can't function. Can't function. And so therefore, the addressing the problem that we are seeing here within our Catholic schools, but also at the national level, requires it requires a holistic kind of approach. Because, for example, if you take how we treat women in the workplace, and if you're having a single mother who is working shift, for example, and has to then go home and deal with children, then again we want to get our employers involved in that process to ensure that, you know, people can have the time and the flexibility to be able to address their household needs. The government needs to get involved, for example, in terms of providing adequate transportation, because you can't have people standing at the side of the road waiting for a taxi and so on, because it has a ripple effect which ends up in these kinds of results that we are seeing here. And then the net effect of that is going to be delinquency, it is going to be crime, it is going to be all of those things that we are seeing manifest in the society today.
His Grace's article says, it is troubling because we have far too many schools and children who fail to reach minimal standards of the academic education. You've just given us the stats.
Yes.
Some schools have failed consistently over the years. This, for me, is robbing the children of their life chances.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
But we are looking at it. It's
Yes.
not a simple problem to solve.
It is not a simple problem to solve. No, it's not a simple problem. And as he points out in his article in the Catholic News, we have the Concordant arrangement with the government, which dates back to 1960. So this actually, the Concordant actually predates the 62 Constitution.
Right.
So it's been around a long time. It actually predates the Education Act. And it prescribes a certain kind of role for the government vis-a-vis the denominations, the religious groups and so on, who had historically been very dominant in terms of providing education. We are now 50 years on, and we need to sort of step back and take a good, hard look at that and determine how that now needs to be reshaped in a way that is consistent with what we would like to achieve in this modern Trinidad and Tobago. And in that regard, I think that parents need to be signaling, I think, to not only to the church, of course, but also to government, that, look, this situation cannot continue. It is not tenable, and something needs to change. And from our perspective, I think in the context of the pastoral planning exercise that is that His Grace has now initiated and that we are working on, we are beginning to step back and take a very hard look at all of these areas, including the question of the Concordant, the relationship between government and the religious bodies and so on. Because the point is that constitutionally, parents, both the constitution of our country, the international covenants that we have signed as a country, and church teaching tell you that the parents have a right to put their children in a school which will sustain whatever faith tradition that they are in. So if I'm a Muslim, then I have a right to send my child to a Muslim school. If I'm a Catholic, I have a right to send my child to a Catholic school. So we have those constitutional rights. The question now is, how do we uphold those rights that we have within an institutional structure that facilitates that process? We don't know the answer to that question as yet, but we are going to begin the process of working on how we develop that answer.
Well, that triggers a big question here for me, and I don't know if you have the answer. When we look at our 118 primary schools,
yes.
What percentage of the population is Catholic? If we are saying that we have a dwindling Catholic population, from the last
population census, the Catholic population is about 21%. So Catholics are still the largest denomination in the country. But they're about just about 21%. Yes.
So we're talking about 300,000, just under 300,000.
It's about 208. Well, according to the census, it was about 280,000. So by now, that was the 2011 census. So by now, you may be talking about close to 300,000 people.
Okay,
who have declared themselves
baptized Catholic.
Who have declared themselves to be Catholic.
Okay,
yes.
good. Within the 118 schools, which are primary, and then you said 17 schools are secondary.
16
are secondary schools,
schools,
right? What is the percentage population of Catholics in those schools?
That's a very good question, Deacon, and I don't know the answer to that question. It is one of the things that we need to now interrogate as we are working on this question of Catholic education. We need to find out, you see, the Catholic schools have always been open and inclusive. So that we have always, and this historically, we have always allowed anybody to come into the school. But I think one of our priests raised the question. He said, can you conceive of a Catholic school where there are no Catholics in it at all? And so therefore, yes, you might want to say, yes, we have an inclusive approach. We will admit anybody to the school. But clearly, a Catholic school should have more Catholics than not, okay? So there's that particular issue. And we have to find, therefore, we have to find a way that once we are in control of that institution, once we are in control of that school, to ensure that that school retains its identity. So the second thing that we need to focus on, and we need to get the data on, is how many of our teachers and principals are Catholic in our schools. Our friends at CEBM indicate that they believe that most of them are. But one of the issues that we have to again interrogate is a teacher may come in to your school as a teacher, or may be hired as a Catholic, and then 5 years or 10 years later,
less than that.
We find that they are not.
Right.
So we have to interrogate that, because I think that we have to ensure, and the Concordant allows that. It says that's one of the reasons you can determine who teaches in your school and who does not teach in your school. We have to interrogate that as well. And one of the other issues that we have is the whole question of the quality of our facilities. The truth of the matter is that if you if we're living in an urban area and you see a school like Sacred Heart or one of these schools and so on, you may think that this is what an RC school in the country looks like, and that is not so.
That is absolutely
correct. It is absolutely not so. They are, a lot of them are extremely old, they are in very bad shape, and they do not have a learning environment that is conducive for learning for our children.
And do the results reflect?
And the results clearly, the results reflect that. And then you have a situation, for example, in our urban schools, like in our East Port of Spain schools, where, as we know, we have had instances of children having to hide because of gunshots and violence and so on in the neighborhood. You can't have children being educated in an environment where there is violence and fear in the community.
How do we take back our schools? Having said all that, you are the chair of CREDI.
Yes.
Let me hear what I know that His Grace says that this has absorbed a lot of his time over the last 8 months.
Yes.
You all are putting together a plan.
The SRC is working on the plan. So part of the thing about the plan is that the plan is taking these 5 areas. We now have 6 areas, actually, because we've now added youth. There's a meeting of vicars and clergy next week, and then the plan is going to go back down to the parishes. And we want parishes to tell us what they think needs to be done about these areas, including Catholic education. What steps, what actions should we take to be able to address the problem? Because you don't want a situation, I mean, clearly His Grace does not want to have a situation where the plan sort of comes from on high and he says, this is what we need to do. I think he wants to hear from everybody that's possible. And the important thing about that as well is that the situation in different communities is different. And therefore, what it may be appropriate for Southwest Trinidad, down in Cedros and so on, may be very different from what is needed in the case of East Port of Spain. In fact, East Port of Spain has to be sort of ring-fenced as a very special area that needs special kinds of interventions because of what is happening in that community. Whereas what you do in Matlot or in Sangre Grande and so on may be very different. So we want the parishioners to come back and make their input in terms of what they think needs to be done in respect of Catholic education at a national level, but also within their particular communities.
We've been discussing our education system, our Catholic education system. We've been discussing His Grace's article, which says we need to take back our schools. Now, many of you might be thinking of taking back our schools, saying we want to get our schools back, we'll pay for them, whatever the case may be, but we're hearing and we're developing on this whole statement, we need to take back our schools. We're going to be opening the lines just now. I'm speaking with Dr. Farrell. Dr. Farrell is the chair of CREDI, and he's going to tell you what CREDI is all about. But I know you all know what CREDI is all about because a lot of you all are graduates from CREDI. But more than that, we would like to hear from you, your ideas on this. Now, Dr. Farrell mentioned that we're going to be coming to all the parishes where you can give us some feedback in terms of what you would like to see for your Catholic schools. He's been sharing again with us that different schools from different areas may have different needs. Right. My question to him is, are we so locked in to the government and the Ministry of Education's own curriculum that we can't change it? Because just as you're saying, Cedros, Toko, the urban centers may have a different need. How, in this statement, we need to take back our schools. Okay, we're looking at religion and faith and so on, the ethos, identity. But can we at all affect the
changes in the curriculum? Well, you see, I think it's important for people to address the problem at all these different levels. We need to think about education as sort of as a national level. We need to think about it in terms of Catholic education, in terms of the Catholic identity and ethos, and then you need to think about it at what's happening in your particular area. In respect of the curriculum, the national curriculum that we have, parents need to have a voice in terms of how that is done and how it evolves.
I think we have a call. Do we have a call? I was hearing a bell just now. No, we do have a call. Yes. Good evening. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner. This is Deacon Derek Walcott.
Welcome to you too.
Thank you. How can we help you?
Mr. Walcott.
Yes.
I would like to let the people know we need to take back our schools.
Okay. And do you have any comments on that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we have all kind of religion in our schools, not only Catholic. We have Hindu, Muslim, the Anglicans, the Baptists. We need to hold back and take back our schools, even the teachers. We don't have only Catholic in our Catholic schools.
Okay. Yes, so I hear your point that, you know, we need to take back our schools by probably populating them with only Catholics and look at our teachers. But as Dr. Farrell said, you know, he's giving you a little bit of history. You know, our whole education system has been always all-inclusive. This allows us also an opportunity to evangelize too, to help share
when
our
we
own
have,
beliefs.
Catholic things in school,
Yes.
you hear the children tell you they're not supposed to take part, right? They're not supposed to take part in this, in a Catholic school.
Yeah.
No, we could do better than that. We Catholics.
Okay. Okay, I definitely hear you there. And we're going to be discussing some of those same things that you spoke about. Teachers, the amount of teachers. Do we have Catholic teachers in our schools? Yes. And that was one of the things we spoke about. And we are also going to be talking about, you know, the population of our schools. So thank you so much for calling in and giving us, you know, some thoughts on it and your opinion on it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating issue. I mean, this is going to be a fascinating debate on that question.
Yes.
Because the idea of having, number one, a school that is exclusively Catholic, what does that mean and what does that imply? Because Catholicism has never operated like that.
Correct.
The second issue that you would have is, can you envisage a set of schools where you have a class dimension now? So you are now perpetuating a certain amount of inequality. In fact, one of our more vocal educators has made the point that the Concordant, as it has operated, has actually fostered inequality.
Oh my goodness.
And he has argued that, in fact, the Catholic Church has been unwittingly, perhaps, perpetuating inequality as a result of the Concordant. These are among the difficult issues that we are going to have to grapple with as we try to figure out how we go about, in fact, you know, going through the process of taking back our schools.
Okay. Now, at the second level, Archbishop says, we need consistent values, formation, not merely written on a wall, but lived by all members of the faith community. At the third level is we need shared beliefs, our Catholic creed and theology, beliefs about God, about humanity, about the relevance of God for every aspect of human living. But I see we have another call. Good evening. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner.
Yes, good. Hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, good day. Just two quick questions, please. One, what really constitutes Catholic education? And how does that fit in our modernity in terms of, we seem to be so secular. There seems to be a sense of relativity, even in education, in politics, even in the church. And thirdly, I said two, but thirdly, how does the Catholic education, prepares the young people, to be a better citizen? And I don't want to be controversial when we're in so many of our so-called Catholic priests are being charged and accused, for interfering with young boys and young girls. And for me, that speaks to the morality. And if that forms part of the Catholic education, well, then God help us. Could you respond, please?
Absolutely.
I will hang up and listen on the television.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
No, I think three really very, very good questions. In terms of, I mean, he's asking the question, what is a Catholic education? And this is exactly where we started initially. Yeah. And so every school, every Catholic school essentially must be doing two things. It must be providing a very sound academic education because people need to learn to math and English and so on and so forth. But it also at the same time needs to be transmitting the faith. And it needs to be helping our young people, forming them in the faith and helping them develop the values and virtues in order to live a good Christian life.
Yeah.
Now, a good Christian life, and this goes to his point about his third question actually, about good citizenship, because part of our argument, I think as Catholics, would be that if you form people in the values and virtues of the Catholic faith and so on, they are likely to be good citizens.
Correct.
Right? Because the things that we talk about that we want our citizens to be, we want citizens to be participatory, we want people to help each other, we want the emphasis that we place as Catholics on social justice correspond to what the sorts of national values that we think Trinidad and Tobago, and in fact all countries, ought to embrace. And this point about relativism, I think, is an extremely important point because, I mean, today, in today's world, we have societies where we have seen all religious values in decline. Correct. Not just the Catholic and Christian, but all in decline. Societies are becoming more secular, and people are saying that they are not religious, they're spiritual, and so on and so forth. And there is this kind of relativism that we are getting, and so on. And a lot of that is now articulated as well by our politicians, who people are being fed. And we need to bring that back, because we need to then emphasize to people, and the best people to start doing that with are our young people. Correct. And that they need, therefore, to understand that that this relativistic kind of approach to life and so on does not cut it. That there are certain, what you might call certain truth. There's certain truth, there's certain core values, there's certain truths that we must hold on to, which whatever happens, is about technological change or social change, there are certain things that remain core and that remain true. And to his point about what you might, let me put it this way, about exemplary priests, I think that that's an extremely important issue, because our priests do need to be exemplars, just in the same way, for example, as our politicians, our leaders, whether you're a business leader, you're a politician, or you're a religious leader, you ought to be an exemplar. And therefore, when priests fall or they fail in terms of that, then they need, I think, to be censured, and they need, obviously, to be brought to book, so to speak, in terms of that. And I think it doesn't matter who you are, because priests are in a position of trust, and when you betray that trust with a certain kind of behavior that is inconsistent with that, then I think you need to be held to account.
I totally agree. I just want to share with the caller who called in a little while ago, but I see we have another call, so I'm going to take this call, but I'm going to get back to your third point now. Dr. Terrence did speak about it, but we're going to add a little more meat to that. Good evening. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner.
Hi, good evening. Deacon, I must say you have quite an esteemed guest this evening on education.
We've got good Catholics.
I appreciate all his commentaries and so on. But I want to make a point here. For every Catholic school, there is a leader embodied in the principal of the school. The principal has a vision, must have a vision for his or her school. The team of teachers under him would be the regular teachers as well as heads of the different departments and so on. And you articulate your theme, your vision for your school. You get their input into the relevance of this vision and for your students, because you want the best for your students, be they in a rural community or an urban community. We want the best for our children. And the same thing Dr. Farrell is talking about here. Running through the thread of the delivery of the curriculum would be the values and virtues embodied in our faith. So within that curriculum of math and English and social studies and so on, you're teaching the children character formation. You're teaching the children how to live with each other in harmony, in unity. You're teaching your faith. You don't have to go and say, well, say 5 decades of the rosary or so, but embodied in that whole experience, the child is shaped into a citizen. Now, within that academic term or within that academic year, I would suggest like a spiritual emphasis week, where all the teachers on board create an environment of spiritual enhancement for the children. And whether you have a Hindu child in the school or you have a Muslim child in the school, we all go to the same creator, the same God. So you channel this spiritual emphasis on deepening this child's faith in self-worth, self-esteem as a child of God, and then you begin to teach and evangelize, as you would have rightly said, within the school community. Now, the school community is one of growth, one of development. So the whole atmosphere of the school as you enter, you say the ethos or the climate of the school should face you as you enter that door. And that principal has a tremendous responsibility to go through with this. If I get a mandate from God, this is my calling, this is my vocation. I want the best for my school. I want the best for my teachers. So we come down to relationships. Interacting with your teachers should be one of kindness, one of respect, one of responsibility. And that ripples down to the team building and the team efforts, and it ripples down to the children. You see, but not until that we can strive towards this and want this kind of excellence. How are we going to take back our schools? We can have countless principal sessions, and we bring them in, and we afford all kinds of experiences for them. But what you have inside of you will come out one day, you know. I always remember, and I say, if you don't have the this Holy Spirit working within you to transmit this to your people under who you guide every day, and then you go down to the children. God help us. So may God continue to bless you, and Dr. Farrell, you're excellent. Really, really good. I must thank you for the contribution you make to not only to education, but to Trinidad and Tobago and the whole. God bless you all.
Thank you so much for your contributions, and I hope you're going to be part of this whole dialogue and meeting with the parishes.
I think she sounds like a
too.
teacher, a principal, and I think she put a finger on a critically important issue, and that is, and she's absolutely right, that the leadership at the level of that school is decisive.
Correct.
It makes or breaks the school.
Correct.
And so whatever you think you can do at the level of the Archbishop or CEBM and so on, it is what happens, what that principal does within that compound that makes the difference.
Yeah, I had that as number one. Leadership. Yes. She spoke about the leadership. She spoke about the mission and the vision.
Yes.
She spoke about communicating that with her support or his support staff. Right? And then the whole thing about formation and so on coming all the way down.
That's right. And in fact, leadership, by the way, is one of the areas in the pastoral plan that we have identified. So we have leadership in church and society as one of the areas that we see as critically important for people to focus on.
But our whole country is also suffering from
a leadership problem.
A leadership problem.
Exactly. Yes.
I see we have another call. Good evening. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner.
Good evening, and thank you very much for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I have a very small contribution to make. The Concordant needs to be renegotiated. There's no question of doubt about that. I was around, of course, and I knew Archbishop Panton very well. The church was somewhat in a bind because the government was offering free education, and they had to somehow agree, and that was the best way and decision that could have been made at the time. Catholic schools have lost control of their school. Everyone knows that. We need to get back control of our schools so that we can make them in the Catholic spirit. And I'm not speaking here about banning. I know I know of two particular priests, and there were others who were not Catholics. They were actually Hindus who got into Catholic schools, and they have become priests. So we encourage that, and I fully endorse that. But we have given up control of our schools, and we need to get them back. And then the Catholics must be made to contribute. This whole issue with these, these schools, junior schools, Catholics must support it, and they must be given that challenge, or we are going to lose them. So I feel Catholics need to be challenged, and I believe that Archbishop and all that in this group and committee must renegotiate this Concordant Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution, Dr. Farrell.
Well, again, you know, I think he's made a point which we have spent a lot of time discussing and thinking about within at the level of the Archbishop. We in fact, as part of the planning for the pastoral plan on Catholic education, the Archbishop is now going to launch an initiative on Catholic education specifically. And we are going to be forming a group of people, including a couple of lawyers. We haven't reached out to them yet, so it's going to be happening soon, to look at this issue of the Concordant and to look at how we might want to, as the caller put it, renegotiate the Concordant going forward. Because he is absolutely right, in my view, that there are a number of things that we need to do at the level of the school, in terms of school leadership, the parents, and so on and so forth. But there is how should I put it? There's a legal infrastructure that supports Catholic education today, which is the Concordant. And he is right, in my view, that it is unlikely that we are going to be able to make any meaningful changes in terms of restoring Catholic identity and ethos in our schools unless that legal infrastructure
has been updated.
Is updated.
Yes, good. I see we have another call. Good evening. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner.
Yes, thank you. Good evening to you, both gentlemen.
Good evening.
I'm following on the last call about the Concordant. I just have a question, a comment, and a solution.
Okay, go ahead.
It comes from the book of Amos. God asked this question through the prophet Amos concerning the Concordant. Do two men take the road together if they have not planned to do so? Another translation says, if they are not agreed, can we walk hand in hand along the same journey with the government?
Yes.
And then Bishop Leanos, in the AEC assembly they had for vocation, he made an interesting point that to me put an end to all the debate about Catholic education. He said it is an economic problem. Now, I grew up in the era when we had to pay for our own education. In those days, people lived by faith. They don't know how they raise all these children. In a good Catholic school, they lived by faith. Of course, the faith comes from the altar, the source and summit, the Eucharist. And by word and lifestyle, they lived that faith. There was a saying there in those days, in God we trust, in man we bust. And we really bust now. And Scripture confirmed that. They say it is better to trust in God than to trust in man. It is better to trust in God than to trust in princes. In this case, the princess is the government. Now, I went to a Catholic school, Providence Girls Catholic School, from infant to what is now, it was GC, CSEC. We had, the first subject was religious knowledge. It was compulsory to take Bible knowledge at the end in what is now CXX, GC. Everybody got a distinction. And it was prayers, hymns, whole day. You learn the Penny Catechism by heart. To this day, my life is guided by everything I learned there. You know, so the solution is according to Nappy, but we have to bring back the old time days. And as God put it, consider where you were before you fell, repent, and go and do what you did at first. Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling in, and thanks for your contribution.
No, it's quite fascinating, I think. And again, I mean, these contributions are really quite on point, I think. Again, I think some of us who have looked at this issue are fairly clear that it is not sustainable going forward, the current arrangement. We also, and this probably is because I'm an economist and so on, that I tend to think this way, and I may be, and I acknowledge that I may be wrong. But it is really important for parents to make a contribution to their child's education. The government embarked on this whole notion of free education, and we have taken in this culture of freeness. Everything that we want is supposed to be given to us for free or subsidized. And I mean, here's not the place for me to talk about you know, those sort of economics, about fuel and all of those things. And we see what the minister comes with in his budget on Monday. On Monday. But we have a culture of freeness. And education must be free and health must be free. And nobody wants to make a contribution to anything. And she is absolutely right that if you want to have your child have a good, sound academic education in a good, solid Catholic environment, then depending on your means, and this is important, depending on your means, you ought to be able to make some contribution. And the second contribution that we think that parents must make is that parents must be prepared to invest time in their children at home and in the school. So the school is not some kind of glorified daycare center.
Correct.
I drop the child off and I don't look back until it is time to pick up that child and so on, and the teachers will take care of everything. No, the school becomes part of the community. The school becomes an extension of your household in terms of the education of the child, and you must, as a parent, take an interest in that, and the principals and the teachers must hold the parents accountable.
Yes.
For what is happening with the child. So there is a parents' meeting every term where you come and you sit down with the teachers and discuss what is happening with the child, and they can discuss what is happening with you. And we know we have a lot of children who have special needs. We have children who are autistic, who are dyslexic, who may have physical disabilities, who have hearing problems with eyesight and so on. These need to be diagnosed, and then you need to have a plan in the school where the teacher can deal and address these situations and so on, with working with the parents. So parents need to take greater responsibility, I think. And in some cases, this may mean actually making a financial contribution towards the education of their children.
I just want to share with the viewing public, you all have an opportunity to make a financial contribution because we've got priests, clergy and deacons who can cook tomorrow. It's going to be in the grandstand. So we want to see you all there. All of you who would like to help contribute. Dr. Farrell spoke about it. The caller just before also spoke about it. As Catholics, we need to make a contribution towards it. And I think it's very integral. It's actually essential that we take an active role and participate also in your child's school life. And being a father of 4, I remember going to all of these teachers' meetings, parent-teachers' meetings and so on. And I'll be honest with you, many children did not have their parents come. Yes. You know, and sports days, you know, they'll drop off their kids to sports days and they wouldn't be taking part. And that was it. It was kind of like, as you said, a daycare center. You know, how are you? I mean, if you are interested in your child's education, their Catholic education, as well as their academic education, it is very important that you play an active role in that.
Absolutely.
And contribute financially also. But I want to throw in another thing here. We spoke about, you know, the curriculum.
Yes.
We spoke about formation.
Yes.
We spoke about leadership.
Yeah.
What is happening? Are you all looking at teacher formation?
Yes, well, we talked about credit, and that is exactly the role of credit. And you see, one of the things that His Grace was pretty insistent on when he came in December was that he said credit must continue, and it is continuing, because he has recognized that the formation of teachers is one of the critical elements to get this whole issue resolved. That the teachers and the principals, so educational leadership in the schools, the formation of our teachers and so on, giving them a Bachelor of Education degree that has the right components in it so that they know how to do exactly what the lady before was talking about. That if I am teaching math or I am teaching English, I can fold issues of faith and so on into that instruction, so that it is seamless. It becomes, the children imbibe it. Yeah, exactly. And Credit is about that, and that's what we've done. So Credit has had its issues and its struggles. We are now in a process where we expect that we anticipate that we'll be taking in a new cohort of students for the B.Ed program in January of this year. So we are getting it on the road again. And we, obviously we need money, we need some support, and Credit needs a lot of money. We've been getting some support from the parishes actually in terms of contributions, but that's really what His Grace envisages for the role of Credit in terms of this whole initiative on Catholic education.
I want to, encourage the viewing public. We just have a couple minutes to go, but I want to encourage the viewing public. A lot of you guys outside there have sent your children. Your children have come through the Catholic education system. I don't know. I'm going to talk to this economist right here. What do we have in place for Catholics who would like to give back? Maybe some of their time, their talent, and their finance to our Catholic schools. I mean, I had the benefit of doing baptisms for some young people and some weddings quite recently, where we have top Catholic students who are now scientists at NASA. They are working for Intel, they're working for Google, they're working for Facebook. And they brought their kids from Los Angeles, California, and so on, brought them to Trinidad to have them baptized in the church where they were baptized. Right? So you've got the diaspora outside there, and you've got also the locals. How can we get them in 30 seconds? Is there anything in place at all? That kind of contribution?
Well, there's nothing in place now, but you're quite right. And one of the things about social media, people have sort of negative views on social media sometimes. I think social media is actually quite a very powerful tool for reaching people into the diaspora, for example, so that people no longer need to feel separated from Trinidad and Tobago or from the communities in which they grow up. And I can be living in Toronto, I can be living in London or living in Paris, and I can continue to make a contribution to my local parish or to my local parish church or the school from wherever I am. And we have to find mechanisms like that, using technology and social media to be able to reach to people wherever they are, both here on the ground, but also outside of Trinidad and Tobago.
Dr. Farrell, I want to thank you so much for being part of Shepherd's Corner. I hope we can get you back inside here. The key message from the Archbishop was we need to take back our schools, and that requires all of us seeing the Catholic school as integral to parish and diocesan life. Action step, find ways to assist this vital ministry. Ask about the needs of the schools in your parish. How can the parish, through your support of this ministry, support Priesthood Can Cook initiative? God bless you. Thank you so much for watching on Shepherd's Corner. We'll be back again, on Sunday and later tonight on TV6. Thanks a lot.